Duncan Bennett from Note Sports, Alistair Cox, FIH from FIH, and also with us, John Wyatt, FIH Sports Director, and Mike Joyce, Head of Membership and Education Development. They will be the lead panelists for this workshop, and these would be the 4 areas that this webinar is going to cover. So now, in order to, without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to John Wyatt. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you all very much, as Andre said, for joining today's session. It's great to have this level of interest from all parts of the world in this important topic that sits within our broader sustainability framework that we, like all sports and businesses, are giving an increasing focus to. My role today is to briefly provide some of the broader context within which today's presentations and discussions sit. And we're all increasingly aware of the need for all of our activities to be more sustainable. But the word sustainability covers a wide range of areas and is perhaps used differently around the world. So for us as an Olympic sport, we take our lead from the International Olympic Committee. And you may have noticed the increased focus on sustainability of the Olympic movement and of the Olympic Games in particular within the strategic and future direction documents that have been coming out of the IOC recently. It's therefore important as a sport that we follow the IOC's lead and that we're seen to do so by them and also by all of our stakeholders. Andre, if we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in line with this, our executive board have recently agreed a sustainability framework for hockey, which is benchmarked against the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and is in line with the IOC sustainability strategy. And this enables us to place all of our existing sustainable activity and initiatives that exist within hockey into this consistent framework, which we can then use to explain to the wider hockey family why certain decisions are being made for the long-term benefit and growth of our sport. In turn, this then enables every member of the global hockey family to understand the role that we can all play and how this fits within what is being done at a broader global level. And it enables us to demonstrate to our stakeholders that we as a sport are on the right path. Andre, if we could move to the next slide, please. So to define what we mean by creating a sustainable future for hockey and the framework we've developed following the IOC's lead, as I've just mentioned, is that what we mean is we want to have a positive impact on all people involved in hockey. And this is sometimes referred to as a social sustainability plan. We want activities to leave as small a footprint as possible on the planet, often obviously called environmental sustainability. And we want to ensure that the future prosperity of hockey by developing economically robust plans to maximize resources and generate income to further invest in the growth of the game. And this is sometimes called economic sustainability. So the framework, thank you, Andre, the framework then looks like this, with the 3 focus areas that we're referring to as people, planet, and prosperity, and then the UN Sustainable Development Goals that each of these areas refers to, also shown within this framework. We also really want to highlight this is not an FIH sustainability framework, it's a framework for the whole of hockey, and therefore the different groups within the hockey family, all of whom have a part to play, are detailed in the 3rd row of this framework. So from ourselves here at the FIH and yourselves as national associations and the continental federations, through to all of the players and the officials, the volunteers, the fans that are involved in our game, and then of course all of our commercial suppliers, our partners, the manufacturers of hockey equipment and of hockey facilities. Everyone has a big part to play. So we'll be publishing this strategy together with announcing a sustainability task force in the coming months. and we'll be producing an annual sustainability report to measure and demonstrate our progress in each of these areas. So with that as the broader sustainability context, we come to today's focus on economically sustainable facilities. And as you can see, this fits within UN Sustainable Development Goal 9, called Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure, and within our prosperity focus area. So that's what we really want to focus on in today's discussion. So that's probably enough of an introduction into our broader sustainability plans right now from me. But before I pass over to the experts that we have on the call today, Alistair and Duncan, I'd like to emphasise that from my perspective as sport director here, I'm really keen that hockey facilities around the world are appropriate to the level of hockey that will be played on them. And to ensure sustainable growth of hockey and the sustainable use of those facilities, it's really important at the very start of new projects that all of the factors you'll hear about today are taken into consideration. But from my point of view, importantly, the level and type of hockey that the facility will be used for is also a really key consideration. If the facility will be used or could be used for multiple different sports, or climatic conditions are such that it's preferable for a sand dress turf, for example, it's really important that the most appropriate surface and turf is used to ensure the longevity and to maximize its usage, rather than an expensive water-based turf that might be fantastic for top-end hockey, but is more costly to install, it's more costly to maintain, and it may not be able to be used for other sports. So it may not be the most appropriate and sustainable surface, even if it is perceived to be the best for hockey. So with that thought, thank you again for your time. I hope you enjoy the bulk of the session, and I will pass over to Alistair, who I think is going to take you through the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for those of you in the Americas. Pleasure to be with you. And as Andre mentioned, I'm responsible for facilities and also the FIH quality program. And the quality program is one of the key tools that we are using to try and ensure that the surfaces that we play our sport on are as sustainable as possible. So what we'd like to do this afternoon is just present some of the things we're doing, and it's going to be a bit of a double act between myself and Duncan. Duncan Bennett works for Not Sports, who are one of the leading project consultancies based in the UK, partner of the FIH Academy. Not Sports get involved with a lot of hockey field developments in the UK. They work closely with England Hockey and the other hockey associations in the British Isles. So hopefully this double act is going to work and be informative. If we could go on to the next slide, please, Andre.
I found this on the web.
Hopefully the video is running. It is perfect, thank you. So where are we today in the background to what we're going to discuss? Hockey has been played on synthetic turf for, actually it's closer to 50 years, but for 40 years synthetic turf surfaces have increasingly been the surface of choice for the game. They provide a great playing surface, it's a great experience for the athletes, but we are aware that there are a number of major limitations. A hockey field now is by far the biggest financial investment any hockey club, college, school, university, national association, whoever will make. It really is a very expensive facility. The video seems to have paused, which is unfortunate because the video is showing the construction. It's a time-lapse video. Thank you, Andre. It's a time-lapse video of the training fields that we used at Gold Coast in Australia for the Commonwealth Games in 2018. This is showing a 20-week program of construction condensed into a minute or two. But hopefully it gives people a bit of an appreciation of the complexities of what a hockey field is now and why it is so expensive. and why we therefore need to design and ensure that the facilities we are using are as economically sustainable and viable as possible. If we don't have access to good facilities, people are not going to look at hockey as an attractive sport they wish to participate in. People need good facilities. There is so much choice out there today, different sports, different activities, that if we are not offering an appealing option, they will go elsewhere, and that harms our ability to grow the game. One of the realities of hockey's embracing synthetic turf surfaces has been that now we want to play on surfaces that many other sports, in particular the leading most popular sports, and I'm thinking primarily football, rugby to a degree, other sports who maybe 50, 60 years ago we would be quite happily sharing facilities with, now want to play on different types of surfaces. That means that we are having to invest and build facilities specifically for hockey, and for many people around the world that is a challenge, just generating that economic justification for that expenditure. Equally, we need to recognise that all synthetic turf surfaces, not only do they need maintenance, but they also have a finite life. At some point in the future, that beautiful blue carpet that you see being installed on the field in Australia is going to wear out and need replacing. And that is a significant cost at that point in time. So it's not only raising the funding to build a facility that is important, it's having an economic model that makes the venue sustainable for the future, so that when you come to replacing your carpet in the future, the funding is there. Next slide, please, Andre. As I've already said, that to increase the popularity of hockey globally, we need to give people access to good facilities. Those facilities need to be suitable for the level of hockey they're going to play, as John mentioned, and they need to be viable economically in the longer term. We know that in many countries, access to public funding, government funding, can be linked to the ability of a venue to host international or regional competitions. If you can demonstrate that by building a facility, it is going to create opportunities for tourism and more business generally, that often helps the case of securing funding. So again, we need to recognise that facilities often have to cater for different agendas. They're catering for funding objectives, government objectives, community needs. And Duncan is going to explain how some of those all work together in a few minutes. Increasingly and logically, we are seeing when you build a synthetic turf field, one of its great advantages is you can play on it for much longer than on a natural turf field or on a mineral surface, a gravel surface, whatever it may be. To increase the opportunities to play, people want lighting. Lighting does allow you to play into the evenings, particularly in parts of the world where they're playing hockey predominantly at times of the year when the nights are drawing in fairly early. But lighting is another significant cost. There is the infrastructure cost, there is the operating cost. So again, selecting the most appropriate type of lighting is a key element to making your facility sustainable. I've already mentioned that all synthetic turf surfaces need maintenance, and you need to again budget and plan for the maintenance of those surfaces. There is no point in working really hard to generate the funding to build a facility if you then neglect the facility thereafter and it deteriorates more rapidly. All the benefits and all the appeal of that facility will quite quickly disappear if people feel it's been neglected and not looked after properly. It may also become hazardous to players, and clearly that's in no one's interest. So maintenance is a key element that needs to be considered. And finally, we are faced with the reality that synthetic turf fields, whether it's for hockey or for football or for other sports, are increasingly in many parts of the world coming under legislators' consideration. These fields are made from rubbers and plastics. There is the potential for these fields to be a source of microplastic pollution into the environment. That is something we need to be very aware of. That's something that we need to ensure doesn't actually occur. That can be prevented through good use, good field design, good maintenance. But we need to be aware that, again, all these considerations are only going to increase to the cost of the facility, making it even more important that we design and manage the facility correctly. Next slide, please, Andre. So I'm just going to throw a few suggestions up into the air and then allow Duncan to take over and explain how, as a project consultant, he would take a project through from concept to the delivery. So from a hockey point of view today, we are talking about two types of facility. You can have a full-size 11-a-side field, standard dimensions, normally 100 meters by 55 meters. But that is a very large piece of land. That's a very large space. That's a very large construction. So in many instances, people are starting to consider, particularly those people based in countries where hockey is developing and is a relatively new sport, that maybe a smaller area that can be used by hockey fives would be more appropriate as a starting point. A hockey fives facility is about 1/6 of the size of a full-size field. Therefore, it is logically cheaper. Therefore, it is easier to raise the funding to build the facility in the first place. All of these facilities, whether it's a full-size field or a mini area, has the potential to be used exclusively for hockey, which is great, but also with the right choice of surfacing, it can also become a multi-sport venue that allows you and other sports to work together to spread the cost, to spread the management, to spread the sustainability of the facility into the longer term. If you have a number of sports working together, it often increases participation, it increases the justification for building that facility. And again, I go back to maintenance because it is something that is key to ensuring the longevity of these facilities, that people really need to maintain them. And I'm sure that everybody's aware, it doesn't need me to say it, but the reality is that hockey is often a cash-rich sport. We're not like football. We don't have billions of dollars coming in from TV and sponsorship. That means that every investment we make in a facility has to be justified, and we have to protect every venue and every facility we have for the future. But how we do that is the key to the webinar today. So I will now hand over to Duncan. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. As Alistair explained, I work for Not Sport. We work with customers from all around the UK, whether that be schools or hockey clubs, universities, etc., who are looking to develop artificial turf, surfaced sport, play and recreation facilities of all different shapes and sizes. We're official partners to England Hockey, so hockey is a key market, and we've established a strong reputation for delivering all different types of hockey facilities here in the UK since, well, we've been around since 1984 and partnered with England Hockey since 2012. So as Alistair explained, we work with customers from inception through to specification, through to delivery and project management. So we work with customers from very, very early stages of projects, perhaps even where they're just thinking of perhaps doing a project because they can see a value without really understanding how it could come about and come to fruition. So what we want is to work with customers so that they see a hockey turf pitch of whatever size and type as a prudent investment and not a risk. And that work that we do means that we develop robust plans from a specification, also through to a business plan, finance plan, which underpins the delivery of a successful project each and every time. And the measure of that investment and minimising risk, mitigating risk, covers the benefit to hockey itself, but also more often than not the benefit to the wider community. So in terms of a social impact that I'll touch on in the future slides, as well as how that can be measured, and also hence this topic we're talking about, making sure that it's an economically robust and sustainable facility, considering complete life costs, and as Alistair touched on, maintenance and resurfacing costs. So our work is predominantly in the UK, and within the UK, we see a lot of facilities within schools, for example, that are developed to benefit the school itself, and where a hockey club would be the anchor tenant, but the facility would offer a school and the wider community a facility that would comply and offer performance for example, tennis, sport that's popular in England, netball, and also five-a-side football, football training, etc. So it's a hockey-led project that can provide benefit to the wider community for hockey, critically, but also for a range of other sports that brings about increased social impact, community investment, etc. And what we want is for customers to see the benefit of that, whether they're a club, as I say, a university or a school, whoever it may be, so that we get more and more economically sustainable pitches that are underpinned by that strong business case that's been thought through from inception to procurement to delivery. Because if we deliver more economically sustainable facilities, there's going to be more participation in sport, and crucially hockey, which produces more players, which means there's more demand for more facilities, which means that we then go into the phase again of creating more economically sustainable pitches. So as a visual, that cycle that we're presenting there on the slide in front of you is designed to show that if we can get to a point where we're working with customers of all different backgrounds, on projects of all different sizes, with surfaces of all different types, from water-based elite surfaces down to sand-filled multi-use games areas, then the whole thing becomes a cycle that's sustainable and will promote more and more good quality facilities to achieve the national governing body strategy, and then ultimately feed into what Alistair's explained the FIH are looking to do globally. I think the next slide is back to Alistair. We go on to the next slide. So why should we care about economically sustainable facilities? Well, again, talking from our experience in the UK, we know, and we believe this is true elsewhere around Europe and further afield, that traditional grant aid for sport is shrinking. And a comment that was made by one of the governing bodies here in the UK was, is it reasonable to assume that sport would continue to be subsidised, if you use that word, by governments post-pandemic? So obviously there's a huge economic cost that we're seeing globally, as well as nationally, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And is it fair that sport, as it has historically, at least in the UK, gets money attributed to facility development ahead of other arts and culture, etc., etc.? So we believe that there will still be grants, but they will be reducing, and probably individually as a grant recipient, you can expect to get less money per grant if you are successful, which puts the emphasis and the challenge on the customers and companies like ourselves to create that sustainable business plan underpinning the grant application and the project in general. And I think what we're starting to see and believe is coming around the corner, to use that phrase, is that grants will also be linked directly, and the awards will be criteriaed against sustainability. So any grant application, we believe, will need evidence demonstrating that the project is economically sustainable. Not just in the short term, that if we build this pitch, X hockey club will come and use it, or the wider community will come and use it, but that you can demonstrate that over a 10, maybe even a 20-year period, there's a sustainable business model promoting sport, social levels of inactivity are addressed, etc., etc., and therefore it's a good investment for anybody awarding a grant for your particular project. And as I say, if there's fewer grants and the grant awards are in monetary terms lower, then the only option we see for customers is for the pitches to be developed against that robust economic model. And it's also likely that sustainability will become the focus of attention for customers as a result of that, but also because of external factors that we see in the media around the environmental sustainability generally. And Alistair's touched on that with microplastics and things. So this is the start of a process that we believe will develop over the next couple of years and ongoing probably for the next decade and more, where any investment in sport, in facilities, will be underpinned or be most likely where we can demonstrate a robust, sustainable approach is possible. Go on to the next slide. So hockey, and again, this is where we work day in, day out. We develop economically sustainable business plans, projects for customers all day, every day here in the UK. And that is because we work closely with each and every customer to create a bespoke design encompassing the pitch design, the specification, thinking about all the things that are on the bullet points there on the slide I'll go through in a minute, but to result in a completely informed, understood, robust plan for how that project can be developed and delivered. Because it's fair to say that when we go out and see customers who are looking to develop a project, whether it's an upgrade of an existing facility, a resurface of a hockey pitch, or a complete new build conversion from a grass field site, then it's not that we can't develop a design that will meet the site requirements and the customer requirements. The biggest obstacle to any project is finding the funding to deliver it, because this runs into, you know, $500,000 plus for a project full-size hockey pitch. So what we want to develop is again, if we can go to the next slide, Andre, a process where customers can understand how they can make informed decisions about their project that then give the best chance possible of their scheme happening. So what we want to do is, at the top of that cycle, create a sustainable business plan. To achieve that, what we need to consider are a number of different factors. For example, as we go around the cycle, what are the current legislation requirements in your given area? Now, that might be national, that might be regional, it might be global, but the legislation that is exists would be, for example, to achieve an FIH compliance to national pitches or global pitches, as they were, depending on what you're looking to achieve. It could be that we're looking to develop a half-size pitch, a hockey fives pitch. In the UK, we use a model called Gen 2, which is compliant to hockey, tennis, netball, also allowing football. So the legislation's out there against which we would design the pitch, but there's also now legislation coming in, as Alistair's mentioned, from an environmental point of view. And so what we're seeing is more optimism within our industry from the manufacturing sector and designers such as ourselves that there's going to become innovation, which is the next part of the cycle, in terms of base construction, in terms of shock pad solutions, in terms of drainage attenuation, surfaces probably. Alistair's mentioned lighting, so that the legislation is driving innovation and that we can then talk to the customers about that innovation and how it could suit the project that they're looking at. And if we're embracing innovation and that innovative new product meets environmental standards or legislation that's being imposed from, for example, within the EU or by continent or globally, then that could also allow us to access sustainable grants or just access further support to inform the design, to inform the project brief about what sustainable options are out there. So hopefully, and we're starting to see this with decarbonisation grants here in the UK, there is money being attributed to sustainable projects by government, not specifically for sport, but that still help the project come to reality and hopefully get funding. If we embrace innovation, we can get that sustainable support from different departments and specialists that leads to additional grants. That will then inform the design further. We will integrate that innovation and that information into the design itself, which will further inform the project cost, which will further inform the business plan. So this is a cycle that a customer might need to go round 3 or 4 times in the project development stages as they start to consider the changes that are going to be imposed upon us from a sustainability point of view, and the innovative new products that we are starting to see come onto the market and that will increase in number over the coming months and years as environmental requirements, as we keep saying, and sustainability grants are available. So this process that you see before you on the slide is something that we go through with each and every customer for their project, and it's attributable whether you're here in the UK, in Europe, or further afield in Africa or elsewhere. These are the types of considerations we think demonstrate good practice. And of course, in one area, there might be more or less grant support for sustainability compared to another area. So, but it all needs to be considered. And in doing that, hopefully we can get to a stage where the project can be designed specifically for your site, for your scheme. And the Gen 2 concept I mentioned is a great example of how we can integrate other sports to maximise usage and to demonstrate the greatest social impact. So what we're seeing in the UK is an emphasis on using sport to address social levels of inactivity. And hockey is a good example of how you can use walking hockey, back to hockey, the England hockey use as a strategy to get people that have either stopped playing hockey or have never played hockey and who aren't particularly active at the moment onto a hockey field. And initially that might not be playing hockey. That might be just general fitness. It might be what we call here in the UK boot camps. So it's getting people that aren't currently active on a field.
It seems we
Oh,
lost.
there we are.
Okay, you're back.
I'm back. That's our fantastic server. So I think you got as far as what I was saying, which is to get a facility that's being used across all sort of demographics and levels of fitness and sport, so it's the maximum possible impact in your local area and regionally, which should then attract funding and support from local government, regional government, maybe even national government, and feeds back into that cycle that we just went through in the previous slide. So hockey would be the anchor sport. The pitch would be designed to support hockey of whatever level was required, but trying to incorporate as many other activities on the pitch as possible without compromising the pitch and the surface that hopefully you guys have gone and got funding to deliver. But this is a total package that we're trying to develop as a best practice, as I say, and in the UK it's starting to gather some momentum, and we're seeing funding from local government, not specifically because it's a hockey pitch, but because the hockey pitch can bring about a massive impact and benefit to the wider community with hockey as the anchor sport on there. Hopefully that makes sense. Alistair, I think the next slide is yours.
That is. Thank you, Duncan. just wanted to pick up on the Gen 2 model that you mentioned, which is an initiative that we worked on last year. For many people around the world, the key to developing facilities for hockey is to provide a facility that can be used by as many people as possible, and is providing a good sporting environment and an enjoyable experience for the athletes and the players using the facilities. In an ideal world, hockey would be able to partner with the sports that have biggest demand and the greatest number of facilities. And again, in many parts of the world, that would mean that hockey could share facilities with football. However, the sports have very different requirements from the surfaces, different expectations, and it is difficult for both to reach a position where you can happily use the same type of facility and have a good playing experience. A good football surface is not particularly good for hockey, and vice versa. So we wanted to try and find other sports that we could partner with who would use the surfaces that hockey prefers, and also find them acceptable. And then that would enable organisations looking to build facilities to go out and present this as a concept to seek investment, support, funding, whatever it may be. And it doesn't matter if it's a full-size area, a full-size hockey field, or a smaller area where 7-a-side hockey or hockey fives or whatever can be played. We looked at the sports who would use the surfaces that hockey prefers, and we identified activities like tennis, like netball, like lacrosse, like futsal, and they will all happily play on the surfaces. So the Gen 2 concept has been developed as a way of promoting a multi-sport facility that has hockey as the priority activity. Unfortunately, we've seen too many cases at the moment that football is number one, American football or soccer, depending on which version and where you are in the world, or maybe Australian football in that part of the world. A version of football is number one, rugby, lacrosse, other sports number two, and then hockey is 3 or 4, often in the priority ranking, meaning that hockey ends up playing on a less than ideal surface. This hampers the development of the sport in countries who have the ability to build synthetic turf facilities, so parts of Europe, North America, etc., where most hockey is now played on synthetic surfaces, but it's also hampering the development of facilities in parts of the world where there are less synthetic surfaces. So again, if we can promote the concept of hockey sharing facilities and working with other sports, it makes the economic investment and the economic model easier to sell, easier to justify, and easier for people to then build the facilities and have a good hockey experience. So moving on to the next slide, please, Andre. A lot of what we've been working on and developing and briefly presenting this afternoon is available in guidance documents available on the FIH website, fih.ch/QP. And we have guidance on the different types of surfaces, the different types of infrastructure that you need to be considering if you are looking to develop a hockey facility. We also provide guidance on how those facilities should be maintained and how they should be budgeted for in a longer term in terms of sinking funds and ongoing management of the facilities. So I think on to the next slide, which I think is the final slide, and then we would like to open the floor up and encourage all of you joining us today to submit questions and give us your feedback on your experiences in your particular countries. We have talked briefly about a sinking fund. This is very, very important. To replace a synthetic turf carpet on an existing facility The price will differ significantly around the world, but certainly in Europe, you are probably looking at something in between 150 and 200,000 euros just to change the surfacing. That's to lift the old carpet when it's worn out and to dispose of it in an environmentally compatible way. And again, that is coming under increased regulation, which inevitably pushes the costs up, to then replace that worn out carpet with a new carpet to give you another 10 to 15 years life in the facility. To ensure that when that carpet wears out, you have enough money, you need to be setting aside something in the order of 20,000 euros per year to accrue the amount of money you're going to need when replacement is required. That in itself is a major burden for many organizations. How do they generate the ongoing income to ensure that they can set aside 20,000 euros per year? The business planning is key to trying to ensure that can happen. Duncan's mentioned, and I'm sure he can expand in further detail about funding possibilities. These are very regional, country by country, region by region, but we are seeing opportunities out there for public support to build facilities if you can make a good case. We would really like to encourage, and we are trying to stimulate interest from the people who build the fields to find innovative ways of constructing fields that allow the construction to be much cheaper and therefore more achievable. We do fully recognise that the cost of a facility is the biggest hurdle for many people, many national associations to actually develop higher quality, better quality hockey facilities. So anything we can do to encourage the industry to innovate and develop better technology has got to be positive. And we are seeing some positive signs coming from companies in that respect. And again, as Duncan mentioned, we mustn't lose sight that within the sustainability agenda, we need to look at how we build these fields. Can we build them in more sustainable ways with less impact on the environment? If you go back to the video that we had at the beginning of that field being built in Australia, the first thing they do is effectively strip the site of all the native vegetation, clear it, grade the natural ground, and then import thousands of tons of stone to build a foundation. That stone in itself has come from a quarry. That's had an environmental impact. Can we be more sustainable using construction products that have less impact on the planet? So these are all things that we're looking at, and we're working with the construction industry, the synthetic turf industry. Many of these issues are not only unique to hockey, they are common to other sports. So we are sharing experiences and knowledge with the likes of FIFA, World Rugby, and other international sports federations, so that where we can, we cooperate and benefit and utilise the expertise that we all collectively have. But I'd like to open the floor up to questions. I'm assuming that Mike or Andre are going to lead on these, so I will pass the baton over to them.
Thank you, Alistair. Before we start the questions, I just wanted to ask Duncan if there's any point you want to raise regarding one of these four topics, or to them, or if you're happy, if you have anything more to add.
Yeah, Alistair mentioned that I might be able to go into more detail about funding, which I don't think I'll say thank you for. But yes, it is regional. I think the point I was hoping to get across is we see a trend across Europe and elsewhere, customers telling us, governing bodies telling us that the trend seems to be along the lines of presenting a case where there's the biggest impact regionally. And as I mentioned throughout, that hockey would be the anchor sport, but that demonstrates that there is a wider social impact than potentially just hockey. So that is where we see, and in the UK, we've had customers secure hundreds of thousands of local government grant towards their project because they can demonstrate that hockey's going to benefit. It's going to be fantastic for hockey, but it's going to link to health outreach programs, to key demographics that are government's sort of target for inactivity. So the elderly, and that way we are seeing more money available than just applying to build a hockey pitch, if we want to put it like that. So that would be interesting, as you know, people consider what we've been talking about, and over the coming months to get some feedback if that is consistent and carries across continents and countries.
Could I just ask both of you, because I haven't seen a question yet based on that, and I think it would be relevant to close that point, because it seems a very strong trend. Would you both agree that today, not just for hockey but for all sports, making a case about how useful your facility is to the wider community increases the likelihood of getting funding for that?
I would definitely say that, yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree, Andre, 100%. Unless you've got some very rich benefactor who effectively is just giving a grant because they have a great passion for hockey or their community, you have fully got to justify the benefits to the local community, to society generally, to justify that investment. And the reality is, in most parts of the world, there is an ever increasing list of activities people can participate in, which makes the case harder and harder.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now go to the part of the questions of our participants. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Just a second. Okay, I think it's done. And I would like to first ask Claire Kelly. Claire, if you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera so that we can see you.
Oh. Saying my camera is, I don't know if, can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. If the camera doesn't work, your voice...
It doesn't want to come on.
No worries.
Yeah, I put a question into the chat there about, there was some mention of environmental sustainability. I don't know if people can read it. Does the FIH see water-based pitches still being the gold standard, basically? Like, they are massively expensive. They use a huge amount of water, which is an environmental concern for people. And I believe there was some talk that Rio would be the last time a water-based pitch was going to be used. I'm just wondering what the discussion is on that at the moment, or where it's at.
Andre, should I take that?
Sure.
Hi Claire, thanks for your question. And yes, you're absolutely right. There has been and there continues to be a focus on this as a project within the FIH, but also within the whole of the industry. What was previously announced was our intention to have a dry or non-watered turf in Paris in 2024. So Tokyo had always been planned to be watered, but the plan, what we were aiming for, was to try and have a dry turf in 2024. We've made good progress with a number of industry partners. The truth is that COVID has set that back significantly. We've not been able to do some of the trials that we wanted to. And so realistically, I think it's unlikely that we will now achieve that in time for Paris, but it is certainly something that is high on the agenda and we're looking to achieve as soon as possible. The challenge is clearly the best lubricant at the moment in the world is water. And so if we're looking to reduce the usage of water, and actually we have made good strides in that with the Tokyo turf, where about half the water will be required compared to previous turfs. So we're reducing the amount of water, but to reduce it to 0 on a dry day means that we need something else to ensure there is a little bit of lubrication or less friction with the current turf. And the current turf is deliberately a very grippy surface, which then is watered to reduce some of that grip. And clearly there are injury concerns about having a totally dry surface with that amount of friction, that amount of grip. So the innovation is to try and find a turf or a substance that can be used to produce that turf that reduces the friction without needing to use water, but doesn't reduce it to the point that if it rains, then the surface becomes too slippery to be able to play on. So it's a very challenging area. It's an area that, as I say, we've made good progress on. We certainly see the future not requiring surfaces that require to be watered, because they are more expensive both to install and to maintain, but that we need to find a solution that doesn't negatively impact on our sport, which is so exciting because it's so fast and has 3D skills. And as we all know, the current non-watered solutions, which are using some kind of filling, usually sand, are a much slower surface, particularly, and a stickier surface, particularly when it's dry. So you're absolutely right. It is still a focus. It won't be until Paris at the very earliest, and probably just slightly after Paris.
No, thanks for that. It's just obviously here in Ireland we get a lot of rain. And I think, and I do understand, like, it is a global sport and there's so many different environments and that kind of thing that pitches would be going down to. And I think part of my frustration here, and it's a personal thing, is people don't quite understand, and this comes back down to the clubs, whoever's putting in the facilities, what the actual requirements are. I think players and coaches appear out on a pitch and actually expect it to be pretty much flooded type thing, saying, oh, within 60 minutes or whatever. And I think there's a bit of an education process, but I think that's probably more at club level or at construction level, that people are educated on what's actually required. So I did have a second question. I'm just going to sneak it in there. It was just could you remind us of what sports are deemed compatible with hockey in respect of sharing pitch facilities and that kind of thing? I know you mentioned soccer and rugby are not compatible sports for a hockey surface, but could you just recap maybe on what ones are?
If I can pick up on that, Claire, and just to follow up on a couple of things John said, I think ultimately, from a standards perspective, we see a situation where we will define how a field at the top level should perform. And if you use water to achieve that, that's fine. But ideally, you'll achieve that performance without water, which will then allow these fields to be built in parts of the world where water clearly is a challenge. I think people should be aware that this technology is probably not going to result in significant cost savings. Yes, you don't have to invest in an irrigation system, and yes, you don't have to invest in water potentially. But at the moment, as an industry or as a sport, we benefit from, we are basically using the same technology that goes into a tennis court or a football field or whatever it may be. If we end up with people developing synthetic turf technology specifically for hockey, that is a much smaller market. Therefore, that R&D is going to have to be recouped by the industry. Inevitably, that's going to mean that the cost of things is not going to drop as dramatically as people might be hoping. That is a bit of a negative, I fully accept, but I think it's reality. That the move to dry fields is more to do with environmental sustainability than economic sustainability. But moving on to your second point, effectively, you can split it crudely into big ball sports and small ball sports, in that the likes of football and rugby particularly want to play on a surface that still plays like a natural grass field. And obviously hockey as a sport has moved away from playing on natural grass in many parts of the world. Although a good quality natural grass field still provides an acceptable hockey experience, the style of play, etc., is quite different. Therefore, hockey wants a fast, slick surface with or without water. Those surfaces can be used by tennis, they can be used by netball, they can be used by futsal. Yes, you can play soccer on them, you can play football on them. It's just that effectively, instead of hockey having to put up with a football surface, you're asking football to put up with a hockey surface, and there's a bit of a struggle there. These facilities can also be used for sports like lacrosse. You can do athletics training on them, baseball, etc., etc. We have got some guidance documents on the website, and I can forward those on to you, because I'm sure obviously we will have your email details so you have access to them. But I think the important thing with any multi-sport facility is it is a compromise between the different sports, and it's finding out to what degree is hockey willing to compromise, to what degree is tennis or netball or football willing to compromise, and that will differ project to project, case to case, country to country. So it's finding partners who are willing to share that compromise with you to make it work.
Thank you for that.
You're on mute, Andre.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. I just wanted to pick up on something both of you mentioned earlier, and trying to give it a bit more a realistic scenario. So I'll probably start with Duncan on that. Do you have a best practice case that you can share with the hockey community about a pitch that was, let's say, that followed a bit that process that you've showed us earlier?
Yeah, one that springs to mind is a pitch not too far from us here in the centre of England, where we worked for 2 years with a school who were looking to develop a sports field, and initially that was the sort of brief. Within the town, there was a growing hockey club who needed a facility, an additional facility to the one they were playing on. And so that cycle that I went through on one of the earlier slides was started with the conversation with the school to give an overview of how a pitch could be delivered on the site, fairly broad in terms of design and detail at that stage. And then picking up on what Alistair was saying there about conversations with different user groups, the school and ourselves then did a fair amount of stakeholder engagement, which means that we went to the local community, different teams, different sports, to find out what was in demand in the area. And hockey was to use that phrase again, the anchor sport. So that led and informed the design. So it became a hockey pitch, and the school were happy with that. They wanted it to be used for additional sports. We've mentioned bat and ball games like softball, baseball, but also tennis, netball, as I've mentioned, and they wanted it for recreational football. So that worked for the site, and the hockey club were able to deliver a pitch that met their requirements. And then that engagement with the stakeholders meant that they could go to the local government to apply for funding, because it had such a local impact in terms of sport and activity. And that secured them hundreds of thousands of pounds of local government funding, because the local town council and regional council saw that the benefit would be such it was worth their investment and taxpayers' money. So they put significant amount in, which then creates almost like a domino effect. If you can get a funder to commit to a project, it often opens doors to the next funder and the next funder. So it was a multi-agency funded project in the end, with some contribution from the school, with local government contribution, sports grants, and some local charitable grants as well, to deliver a project which ended up being a full-size hockey pitch and handed over just last week. So the hockey club are the anchor sport, with other sports engaged and on site. Now it's opened. So that sort of is a good example of where I'm saying that you can go around that cycle probably more than once, but to identify the best ways of delivering the specific project on your site.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Alistair, one of the things you mentioned earlier was about the fact that some surfaces are more suitable for specific types of sports. You mentioned about large balls and smaller types of balls, like the hockey one. Can you give an example or that you're aware of, or that you've actually knew on reality, where these obstacles are happening there, and if there is one, what is the best way to deal with that? And I'm thinking, for instance, that in some countries, having access to a football ground, even if it's a 3G pitch, is probably the most likely opportunity for use. So is there any recommendation that you can make to these? And this, I think this example would probably cover mostly all developing nations. So could you, and Duncan, if you have any also any good points that you want to bring about this, feel free to do so. Alistair, sorry, a long question.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Thanks, Andre. I think you can develop a hierarchy of good to bad, or 1 to 10, whatever it may be, in terms of surface preferences. And any surface that is undulating, rough, etc., is going to be bad for all sports. You can play hockey on asphalt. You can play hockey on a mineral surface if it's in good condition. So it's ensuring, at the very low level, it's just ensuring that whatever you're playing on is in good condition. It is maintained properly, whether that's natural grass or whether that is just soil or dirt, or asphalt or concrete, etc., etc. A long pile 3G football type surface has the added benefit of being a bit more comfortable. If you fall on it, it's not going to hurt you. It's not abrasive. And probably for lower level hockey, where the players have slightly less skill, probably slightly less power, etc., it's the fact it's slower is probably not the end of the world. It's still consistent and relatively true, even if the ball is only rolling at half the speed you would get on a wet field or whatever it may be. So again, it's matching expectations to the level of play that is going to take place on that facility. Not everybody, I use the analogy that everybody would love to own a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or whatever it may be, but the reality is that most of us haven't got the skill to drive those cars to their full potential. We're not Lewis Hamilton's or Max Verstappen's or whoever it may be. So we need to be pragmatic and say, actually, the level of hockey I'm playing, or the level of hockey we wish to cater for, is at this point. Therefore, we can compromise. We don't need a top end wet field, etc., etc. I know Duncan's mentioned England hockey, and they have been quite innovative in what they're doing, because England has the misfortune of having a football association with a very large checkbook who is walking around funding football facilities and persuading communities to actually convert their hockey fields into football fields because they can get more financial support. So that's a different challenge. But one of the things England have done, and I know it's now been picked up by the USA field hockey, is actually looking at different size hockey balls, for example. Use a slightly bigger ball, use a slightly lighter ball, which on these slower surfaces at that development level may give more opportunities. So I think it is key to determining who is the potential audience you're wishing to attract into the hockey family, and getting a facility that those people can happily use, that's convenient, safe, enjoyable.
Okay.
I'd agree with all that, and I think it underlines what we've already set up to a point, which is getting that initial rationalisation of the project. Engagement with you as a customer and the wider community is key. So you understand what people are looking for, so that you don't just charge on, which we've seen elsewhere within the UK, for example, where customers have something fixed in mind. That's what we want, come what may. They deliver it, and then almost wonder why it's not being used in the way that they want. It's because they haven't consulted with people and done good engagement with the community in the first instance.
And I would go back to the Hockey Fives model, because as those facilities are a lot smaller, they are by definition a lot cheaper. So strategically, let's say you have a pot of money which would justify, would cover the cost of one full field. Are you better building one full field, or are you better building 5 or 6 Hockey Five facilities in different parts of your country or different parts of the city, whatever it may be, to actually allow more people to benefit? Because again, we know that people are not going to travel large distances to a central facility. That's increasingly, as time becomes more precious. Certainly studies that I've seen published or research on in a number of countries, people now are not willing to travel more than about 15-20 minutes to their recreational venue. So if you're saying it's an hour and a half's drive or walk or whatever it may be, it's not going to work. So build it local, build it small, build it local might be a better approach.
So could I, in a summary, and then trying to gather the different ideas that were presented here, would I say that if I was a province, if I was a developing hockey nation, one of the ways that I could create a sustainable facility for me would either to maybe, well, first of all, focus on opportunities to team up with other sports. I think that's one of the key ideas that that was seen here. Eventually, even adapting a bit the format of play or some of the elements of play. You mentioned balls, for instance, so that people can enjoy the playing experience more. So that's one idea. But the other one I seem to understand is actually considering that maybe your best facility might not be a full-size hockey pitch. It might be, for instance, could it be? Would it be an idea to surface an existing a concrete pitch, for instance?
Yeah, sorry, Andre, just to leap it. Yeah, we are doing more and more because traditional funding for sport is less in the UK and elsewhere. We're doing more and more conversions of old tennis courts, for example, tarmac surfaces, either overlaying what schools or clubs have already got to create a training facility, a Hockey Fives pitch size, because, as Alice has already said, by definition, it's a smaller size. It's therefore more affordable, and then there's more likely to be small regional grants that can underpin the business case. So as a business in what might be perceived as quite an affluent hockey playing nation, we're doing more and more of these types of smaller projects because it meets the local requirements and it provides that vital impact to the local community for hockey and those other activities. So yeah, smaller facilities are definitely increasing in regularity.
It's a lot easier to justify the case for a full-size facility if you can show you have an existing smaller facility that is exceeding capacity. If you're turning people away, the case for another facility is a lot easier to make than that speculative, I have this dream of building an 11-a-side hockey facility.
But I want to pick this point because it seems something that a new trend that you are considering that haven't heard before, which is that if I'm an association or an NA trying to think about economically sustainable pitches, I shouldn't be just thinking about where is the land to build a new pitch. I should also be considering where is an old facility that needs resurfacing, and where is the opportunity for me to team up with them so that suddenly we can have a facility that is both works for me and for the others. That seems what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. About 60% of the cost of a new facility is below the surface. It's the foundations, the drainage, the perimeter fencing, everything. If that's all there, if you've got some underused tennis courts, baseball courts, basketball courts, sorry, whatever it may be, that's all there. So suddenly you've reduced the cost of the hockey specific bit significantly. So yeah, if you've got a concrete area, if you've got an asphalt area, it's much easier to convert and upgrade than to start from scratch.
And what we do, and this will be services offered, by companies all around the world. But what we do is do that. We call it sort of site rationalisation. So yeah, there might be space for a full-size hockey pitch, but actually, you've got this bank of asphalt court over here, and that might be as one customer called it, an easy win initially, just to upgrade, resurface. And then a bigger long-term plan to put a hockey pitch in the other area of land that's affordable. So it's about realising what the space you've got available can deliver, and then maybe taking a phased approach as to what Alistair's already said, a lower cost investment initially that might be more affordable and easier to secure funding for, to then underpin and create that business case we keep going back to for the larger pitch investment as a second phase.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Robert Fernandez to turn his camera on and his microphone on as well. Robert, I didn't forget you. It was just that I didn't want to move to the next question before finalizing the point. Hope everything is okay over there in Guyana. The floor is yours, Robert.
Yes, it is. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask a question about if the FIH is doing anything to link the developed world with the developing world in terms of facilities, because I see an opportunity where both needs can be met, where the need for ensuring that all surfaces that are taken up when they're no longer, you can no longer play high-level hockey on them, and you need to show that you're disposing of the surface in a sustainable manner and so on. And then you have the developing world, where the majority of the cost of putting down facilities is that artificial surface, because I think the cost of the underlying construction and so on in the developing world is a lot cheaper than it is in the European nations and so on. And for instance, full-size artificial turf that needs to be resurfaced may have sections of it that are still in really good condition, which can now be reused for a hockey 5 pitch or even a smaller pitch. So I see an opportunity there where the developed world needs to show that they are being environmentally responsible in recycling, and the developing world can cut down on the cost of the most expensive part of the facility for them, which is that artificial surface. So maybe my question is the FIH looking at opportunities to basically facilitate that that exchange?
I think that reminds us, gentlemen, of a meeting the three of us had in the UK, if I remember well. Yeah. So who wants to start?
Well,
I'll let Alistair go on.
Robert makes a really good point, and it is an initiative that the European Hockey Federation have been working on for a number of years, just relocating within Europe from the major hockey nations to developing nations in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe. I think a key thing Robert said was actually he was recognizing that it's probably not always feasible to lift a full size field and relocate it. Every time the surfacing comes in rolls. When you cut the rolls to lift them, there's going to be some scrappage, some wastage. But it is more conceivable that you would have enough carpet left to build a smaller area. So you could maybe take a couple of hockey 5s facilities out of a full-size field. There are obviously costs, there's transportation, there's installation at the other end. There may be the need to have the underlayer, the rubber pad or what have you beneath the carpet. That may not be changed when the carpet is changed. And there is a bureaucracy that gets in the way that when you lift an old carpet in Europe, in many countries, it is technically now classified as a waste material because you are lifting it to dispose of it. And to stop people dumping waste in other parts of the world, which is clearly environmentally unsustainable, undesirable, the regulations and the bureaucracy to export a second-hand carpet from the developed world to the developing world, to use Robert's terminology, is quite daunting. And I think the experiences from European hockey are that the contractors aren't particularly interested in doing it because they'd rather sell you a new field. That's me being slightly cynical, but I think it's reality. So ultimately, overcoming all that bureaucracy ends up on the National Association or the club who is receiving the surfacing. So it is a solution, but it's not as simple as people would like to make out.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you said there, Alistair. It's in theory it's achievable. In practice, it's got more hurdles than you might first think. I think it has been done, hasn't it, on a couple of occasions, but it is more difficult than it appears.
It is done, and I could probably say I hear of as many disappointed outcomes as positive outcomes. So it's not a guaranteed success, which is unfortunate. And there we are.
I think I would like to take this opportunity to ask just a second, because we just Irina, if you can hear me, can you turn on your camera and your microphone? Oh, your camera is not working, but it's not a problem.
She was there actually.
Okay, you're there. Great. Irina, can you tell us about your experience with the pitches, the second-hand pitches you receive in Ukraine?
So one has been working for us for over, I believe, 10 years now. It's almost 15 years after it has been laid down again. and it's a pitch that national team, women's team is training on. It's not a full-size pitch because we couldn't install a full-size pitch. I don't know whether it was cut in pieces that couldn't be sewn together, or it was because we didn't have enough land. But it has been used and it's in good condition. The second pitch that we have like that was installed in Borispol, not far from our capital, and hasn't been that long, maybe 3 years, 4 years that it has been installed. But that one is a full-sized pitch, and it's not. It wasn't installed perfectly, so the ball jumps a little bit. The layers underneath the carpet had to be exchanged, removed, and replaced. But the club who installed the pitch decided not to do that. So that's why the pitch was laid down not perfectly. It can be used, and we use it for, like, last year, no, the year before, in 19, we used it for Challenge 3. And we had, other teams joining us in Ukraine. But it's certainly, there can be advantages of using secondhand pitches, and at the same time, it really depends on the quality of the pitch that you are lifting and how well it is installed after you deliver it to your country. And like in Ukraine, we don't have too many skilled contractors or subcontractors that we can entrust this task with. So it's basically you have the contractor that hasn't done it before, and they try to do their best, but the result can be disappointing as well. But on that note, like, I spoke with Alistair as well, as far as second gen pitches and multifunctional pitches. But we also participate in the program that you mentioned before with EHF, Give and Get, that you mentioned, where clubs that want to replace the pitch, they basically give away, if the pitch is of good quality, they give it away, and you can work together with European Hockey Federation and decide whether you want to take that pitch on or not. So we are in the process right now, so we'll see how that's going to go.
That's good. I think that summed it up perfectly, Andre.
Thank you very much. Spasiba for that. It was perfect.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for organizing it for us, because I know it's an important topic for many national associations, and a lot of times in the developing world, we indeed don't have enough financing to purchase several full-size pitches. And yes, Hockey 5 is an alternative that came into place, but since we all want to participate with in big hockey, it's not really a long-term solution for ambitious goals.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you for coming in. Guys, is there any point you want to make on this, just to finalize?
I was just going to say, Claire had asked a question about Hockey 5. I wondered if John wanted to respond to that.
I was going to get to that, but I think I was going to ask John maybe to come in on that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So so I would probably John. I'm going to ask Claire. Claire, can you come back in and ask the question that you were asking regarding Hockey 5s, please?
Yeah, sorry, I seem to be monopolising questions. I can't get the camera to work. It was just Hockey 5 has been mentioned quite a bit on the workshop, and from an FIH perspective, what are the plans on the Hockey 5 rollout? Like, I think Irina kind of mentioned as well, everybody wants to play big pitch hockey, 11-a-side hockey. And I get the need to put down facilities and that a Hockey 5's pitch might suit, but everybody has aspirations to get onto a full-size pitch. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, I know the EHF has introduced events and that kind of thing, but what is the traction of Hockey 5s? Like, is it going anywhere? Essentially is my question.
Hi, Claire. Good question, and yeah, very, very positive. Yes, it is. So we currently have more than 70 nations now playing hockey fives around the world. Hockey fives has actually been going since 2014, since the Nanjing Youth Olympic Games, and we had a very successful Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires in 2018 when hockey fives was the most popular sport in terms of numbers of spectators across all of the sports in the Olympics, which is fantastic. So there are many countries where hockey fives has been picked up and is going really well. We, as you've probably seen, have pushed hockey fives a bit more in the last few months, and we've made a few announcements, including a Hockey Fives World Cup, which will take place for the first time in 2023, and then every 4 years after that, and the start of an annual world tour. We're going to do a pilot event here in Switzerland, in Lausanne, this summer in September, and the view will be that will become a multi-stop tour. Hopefully 3 events next year and building to at least 5 events per year after that. And that would be a way of showcasing hockey fives, ideally using temporary facilities to bring it back to today's topic of discussion, and therefore taking hockey to places that maybe hockey hasn't been seen before, on beachfronts or in the middle of city centres in big parks, where rather than taking spectators to a hockey venue, we're actually bringing hockey into the centre of town. So yeah, we've actually found that it's been very positively accepted. I think certain countries are more open to hockey fives, either because of facilities reasons, as we've heard today, in terms of investment, or because getting 22 players together on a field is difficult because of trying to start hockey. Maybe starting off with 10 people is a better place to start. So yeah, we've definitely seen it has grown. You'll be pleased if you'd like to know more, which you clearly do, which is great. We actually ran one of these National Association development workshops about 6 weeks ago. It's available on the FIH Academy website, so you can watch the full video and the full presentation. It's got a lot more detail in it there. But I think what you will start to see is a lot more high-profile Hockey Fives events, because in a country like Ireland, where it hasn't really taken off yet, actually starting to see it at a top level, seeing how exciting it is, seeing top players playing it, initially through streaming and broadcast, is probably a way to start getting people excited about it. We have spoken to Hockey Ireland. At the moment, it's not a priority, as you said. They're relatively recently adopting indoor hockey, so they're putting some investment into indoor hockey. And what we're trying to do is say, not everyone has to play hockey fives, just like not everyone has to play indoor hockey. But this is just another route into hockey. And if in a certain country or community, the best route in is through hockey fives, then fantastic. If the best route into hockey is through indoor hockey, that's great. And if the best route in is through hockey 11-a-side, then equally that's great as well. And often the first time we all pick up a hockey stick, we're not picking up a hockey stick to play a certain format of a game. We're just picking up a hockey stick to have a go. And it might be one of us or one or two of us together. And where that ends up leading will be different in every country in the world, dependent on facilities and coaches and availability of equipment, etc. So a long answer, sorry, to a short question, but a resounding yes. It is definitely going well around the world. I'm sure it will start to take off in Ireland, but there's no rush. And when it does, I'm sure you'll find it a very exciting format.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. No, it was more like I am very aware of hockey fives, and I used to umpire and all that kind of thing. And I've got friends of mine who would be umpiring in like they went to the Youth Olympics and that kind of thing. It was just, I see it at a national level, and I wasn't sure how it was taking off on the ground, and if we're going to go out to our clubs and say, yeah, invest in that size of a pitch if you can't get anything else. I'm not able to get my head around it yet. So no, I'll do a bit more investigation into it. So no, thank you for that.
And have a look at South Africa. There are some hockey fives leagues that have been really successfully set up and run midweek, and it's really taken off there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, John, I'm going to take the advantage of your presence here. Yelena, you have a question regarding Buenos Aires. Can you turn your camera on and your microphone?
Yeah, I was wondering if you can, for all of us, you know, who want to build a case around Hockey 5, is there any way we can get a document or, you know, some kind of marketing materials that highlight that information about the number of spectators for Hockey 5?
Absolutely. So we have some documents now on our website, and I'll send you links, or through Andre, we'll send you some links to those. I don't think that specifically has the number of spectators in Buenos Aires, but over the course of the tournament, there were more than 200,000 spectators over the course of the 9 days. And part of that was because they had a fantastic stadium. I think it was maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people at a time, but it was so popular. There were queues going around the block that they were letting 2,000 people in, watching a match, and then clearing them all out, and then getting the next group in to get more and more people through, because it was so popular. And obviously in Argentina, hockey is such a huge and popular sport. So yeah, there were multiple kind of changeovers during the day, because there are many matches played during a Hockey 5 day, as you know. But over the course of the event, I think it was an 8 or 9 day event, there were more than 200,000 people came through.
And sorry, one more question, since I'm already on. Could you also send a link to the series for Hockey 5 that you did? Because I looked through and I don't know, I'm not familiar with the website, so I don't know where to find it.
Yeah, Andre, you can definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I will also send you some links to the IOC page where you can watch some of the matches, because I think more than presenting the stats, if you can present some videos of that, I think will impress people a lot.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome. Okay, I think we're wrapping up, but before we do, I would just like to ask Jacqueline Mwangi, if you could, I know you have a question, if you can open your microphone and your camera, if you're still there, Jacqueline. Yeah, great. Nice to see you, by the way.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, it's a pleasure just to learn all this from you guys and the progress that's happening in terms of infrastructure. I would just like to know relatively how much would a Hockey 5 pitch cost, because in the area of the world that I'm in, Africa, I think Hockey 5 is really picking up, and this would be really good, especially for smaller nations and even smaller cities that are really excited about this. So maybe just some assistance with that, just to know relatively, that way when you're discussing this kind of topics with stakeholders, then you have a rough idea of what to say. Thank you.
Hi, Jacqueline. It will depend on many variables, what the ground is at the moment, what the site is, the local capacity, etc. But I would, and the cost of a full-size hockey field, let's start with that. The cost of a full-size hockey field around the world differs significantly. To build a field in Europe, it's almost double if you build the same thing in the USA. I have no explanation as to why that is, other than everything in the US seems to be more expensive. Yeah, but it's the same construction, it's the same materials, etc. But it's just what the market in one country will tolerate compared to another country, and the demand. Very ballpark figures, and again, one of the things with Hockey 5s is we have a preferred size or a competition size for the facility, but it can be bigger, it can be smaller. So there's a lot of flexibility at the top level. At the World Cup that John mentioned, or the Youth Olympics, it is a set size, but below that, you can do what you want within reason to make it work. I'm going to put my neck on the block and say maybe between $100,000 and $150,000. But that is very, very broad, and there are so many caveats attached to that that it's probably a useless piece of information. But I mean, simplistically look at it. If you know what the cost of a full-size field would be, and probably take about 25% of that, that is a more realistic way of calculating it. And if you haven't got experience of building hockey fields in your country, if they're building synthetic turf football fields, again, a full-size football field, a full-size hockey field, they're not that dissimilar in price.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to add to that, Alistair, I don't know if you agree, but I think we're starting to see some innovations in base technology, so different ways you can construct a pitch that are probably more suited at the moment to a smaller facility than a full-sized top-level elite hockey pitch. So in the next 12 or 18 months, I do think there'll maybe be some new ways of building a pitch that, as you rightly pointed out, innovation doesn't always cost less, but might make things easier to install if you don't have skilled contractors on the ground in your area of the world. So that's something to keep an eye on, and obviously with the work Alistair's doing, I'm sure that will be sort of communicated out at the right time. But we're quite, for the first time in a long time, personally, I'm quite optimistic that there will be some innovation in pitch construction and products in the not too distant future, if you class a year as not too distant.
Yeah, there's again, football tends to lead in all these things just because of their demand, but there's a concept that one or two companies are now promoting, which they call field in a box. So basically, locally you prepare the ground, then everything else is shipped out in a shipping container, the surfacing, the fencing, the underlayer. That builds you a mini facility, and then the shipping container gets converted into a clubhouse. And that's a really good concept that we would like to encourage the companies who are doing that, and they're internationally operating, to transfer that concept from football to hockey. And there's no reason why they couldn't do that.
Well, gentlemen, this has been probably the longest NA Development Series workshops we've ever had. It's already 2:45 here in Lausanne. We've been here for almost 3 hours, and I cannot thank you enough. I think we had a lot of fortunate coincidences. The fact that we had actually a practical example of what a second-hand pitch can look like, and we could connect the ideas with the actual reality was quite fortunate for everyone, and the fact that we could connect all the information about the guidance and the actual case studies that you brought, Duncan, was really great. A big thank you to you, Duncan, and to you, Alistair, for this really great NA Development Series workshop. Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much to all of you that made some time to be with us. Be attentive to your email, to social media. We tend to do the NA Development Series on a regular basis in different topics, and they're all of them relevant to the development of national associations. So without further ado, thank you very much, and have a great morning, day, evening, night, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.